see you. I'm Presley Reeder. This is the Phoenix Business Forum. We're thrilled to have you. Thanks for joining us for a bite to eat. And Ken and I are going to have a little conversation up here for about 35, 40 minutes, and then we're going to take your questions, and I can ask him some of those questions, so make sure you text them in like David said. And I always tell our guests, this is not hardball. I am not trying to dig to get the story. I'm just trying to learn about them and about leadership and about what's going on in our community that we all care about. So that's what we're going to do today with Ken Brissa.
Yes.
And his name is spelled Brissa, and it's pronounced Brissa. And so I have to ask, what is that?
Yeah, my family's not sure either.
Yeah.
On my father's side, my father is about as 100% Irish as you can imagine, but somewhere generations and generations and generations ago, there was someone French in there. And so they think the name was the spelling of the name was probably changed when my ancestors came to the U.S., so the name stuck, and practically everyone says Brissa when they read it. But my mother would go crazy when someone said Brissa, so she instilled it in us. You have to correct them, that's your name. So
Yeah,
still doing it.
and you grew up in Chicago.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Chicago. Spent, the first 40-odd years of our lives there until it was always on the radar to move to Arizona. And we just decided one day, and now looking at how the last 15 years have unfolded, it was certainly ordained, but we just packed up and went. And, no jobs. We were, job searching along the way, and it was meant to be, and we're never looking back. We're never going back. I won't do winters in Chicago again.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around, a lot of people.
Absolutely.
So I forgot to mention that you're the CEO of the Phoenix Rescue Mission. That's the connection there, in case you missed that. You've been there almost 2 years, and we're going to talk about the rescue mission and what you folks are doing there and the impact you're having, which has been a long-term impact here in Phoenix. We're going to talk a little bit about leadership. Now, I wanted to start though by defining some terms. You work for a charity.
Correct.
So there's a few terms that get thrown around: charity, nonprofit, not-for-profit.
Right.
How would you define a charity so that folks can understand that, and then we'll compare it a little bit to a for-profit?
No, thank you. A charity, I think, is a term that's widely misinterpreted. When people hear the word charity, they think, downtrodden, you have to really scrape by, things like that. Really, charity, nonprofit, not-for-profit, really means that the monies that come in are spent on the things that the charity or the nonprofit exists to address, and at the end of the day, you want to bring in more money than you need to spend, because that gives you more money to create greater impact for the people you serve. So the term nonprofit is really a misnomer. You want to bring in as much money over what you need as you can, of course, to a point. But when you think about how that has affected Phoenix Rescue Mission, earlier in the video it said that 14 people hit the streets every day to minister to the homeless. When I started, that number was somewhere around 4. And we were, in a short amount of time, we were able to increase that number to 14. That number is going to be 16 probably shortly after the first of the year. So when you think about, well, why do you need to bring in more money than you need to spend? It's so you can do that. So you can put 16 people on the streets serving the homeless instead of 4.
Okay. So the money's involved.
Money is definitely involved.
Okay, now profit, even though profit might not be. So how many folks do we have that have experience working in not-for-profit, charity, actually on staff? Wow, a lot of folks. Thank you for your efforts out there. That's great. So it's a business and a not-for-profit audience that we have here. So you've done both too. You were in corporate work and then you transitioned to not-for-profit.
I did.
Are there any stark contrasts that you want to highlight for us so we understand?
Yeah, I would say, of course, one of the biggest contrasts is when you work for a for-profit corporation, you're making people rich. right? That's the ultimate goal.
Well, I own a small business which is for profit, and I can't actually say that. I don't know who's getting rich.
It's coming.
Is it?
It's coming.
Okay.
Yes,
All
you just
right.
have to stick with it.
So the corporate's making people rich. Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course the nonprofit is you're making a difference in people's lives. And one story that resonates with me when people ask me, why did you get into nonprofit? I worked for a corporation that made electronic connectors. So imagine, anything you plug into your computer and now into your phone. This company was called Molex, and they still exist. They're the largest manufacturer of electronic connectors in the world. They had big customers, and IBM was my customer. At that point, I had become an international marketing manager, and I used to travel all over the world. Wherever IBM was doing business, I had to be there. And their research hub is in Raleigh, North Carolina. And one day I was in Raleigh, and I had my sales guy on one side and the engineer for IBM on the other side, and they're talking about an electronic connector, and they're so excited. And I mean, they talk about electronic connectors like the way I talk about my grandkids today. And I just remember having this conscious thought, I can't get that excited about an electronic connector. And that was really, as I look back now, it was God putting something on my heart, like you need to be doing something that you can be excited about. And what I am excited about and have been for the past 15 years is doing what I do for a living to truly help other people and not just make sales.
Okay. Fundraising would be a big distinction. The electronic connector people are raising funds by selling a connector to another company or to an individual. But in your case, as a not-for-profit leader, you're out doing fundraising. Can you talk a little bit about how you learn to do that, what some of the joys and challenges are that come with raising funds?
Yeah, thank you. I think nonprofits come at that general sense of how do we fundraise from one of two places. One of them is it's all about the nonprofit, right? It's all about us, it's all about us, it's all about us. What do you think about us? And it's not so much about the people supporting the nonprofit. And a lot of times nonprofits come at it from a very transactional standpoint. Please sign up for my walk, please donate to my walk, things like that. And it's more about the person who's raising the money and not necessarily the cause behind it. The other nonprofits, and we as a nonprofit and a ministry, we have this approach, and that is talking all about the impact we make, talking about the people that we serve and the differences we make in their lives. And we truly build relationships, and I'm looking around this room, and there are a number of them in this room. We build relationships with the people who support our nonprofit. They know so much about what we do and the impact we make that not only do they stay with us, not only do they bring their time, their talent, and their treasure to us, but then they bring their friends' time and talent and treasure to us. And we're all about relationships, not transactions. And as you can see, the growth we're experiencing is tremendous, and it's because certainly God has provided to keep up with that need through our donors.
Yeah. One thing in not-for-profits is that there's kind of an understanding that if you're going to go work for a not-for-profit, you're tied to the mission, but you're not going to make any money.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I would think that could be a challenge for a leader, right? If you were working at Molex, you said?
Right.
Molex, right? They're compensating people. They get profit. They compensate their people. But in a not-for-profit, so I guess my question would be, how do you lead a group that is motivated maybe differently, or everybody needs to make a buck? How's that a different leadership style or approach with your team?
You can do both well simultaneously. You can focus on your mission and you can make significant impact on your mission, but really effective nonprofits realize that their team, the people that they employ and the people who wake up every morning and go fight that fight for that mission, that they have needs, they have families, and they're an investment, and we make an investment in our people. We, in fact, right now we're in the process of looking at what we do from a compensation standpoint. We are in a time now where people are, switching positions left and right. The Great Resignation. We're really proud of the fact that our turnover rate is really low, and I think it's a combination of we have people who are just wildly passionate about Christ and about what we do. as a mission, but we also value them as people, and they feel really valued. And a lot of times that doesn't just reside in how much is on that pay stub every other Friday. That's a part of it. But it's also a part of how they're treated, how they're interacted with when they have a family issue going on and they're going to need to be away from the office and they need the flexibility and the like. We treat our people the way we would want to be treated, really, truly. I mean, it's a biblical principle. We treat our people the way we'd want to be treated.
Great. I'm really fascinated by fundraising. So one more question on that, and then I promise we'll move on to the rescue mission. But what do you think works right now in fundraising? What works well, what doesn't? I mean, I understand the transactional versus relational nature that you talked about, but I mean, you sending out mailings at the holidays? Does the tax credit thing work? What's working to get people motivated to give?
For instance, the tax credit, direct mail, which are the mail pieces we send out, or direct response, which are the emails we send out asking for donations. Those are a means to an end, right? To me, those are tools in the box. What really works when it comes to fundraising, and I talked about the relationship part before, but it's not the relationship with the donor and the gift officer or the donor and the person in program. It's the relationship with the organization. So our team has a philosophy. We actually, if you can imagine, 6 different levels of relationship. And when someone is at a place where it's like, I think I know what Phoenix Rescue Mission does, I might have heard about Phoenix Rescue Mission, that's the very kind of like lowest end of it. All the way on the other end of the spectrum is what we call ownership. I feel like I have Phoenix Rescue Mission in my DNA. And the way you do that is by building the relationship with the donor so that the donor has the relationship with the organization. Because if you're a gift officer at Phoenix Rescue Mission and the relationship is with you, when you go to another organization, the chance of that donor's relationship staying with the organization is not very high. We want our donors, our supporters, to have relationships with as many people at Phoenix Rescue Mission as possible so that the relationship is truly with the mission and the impact we make and not the people who work there.
I like how you talk about it in steps. In case you are a donor or have ever been a donor, you are in what's considered a donor funnel. And nonprofits have really interesting ways of describing the path that their donors are on. Mm-hmm. I think yours was better than a funnel. A funnel made me feel like I was oil going into the car at the oil change. Right? Yours was very relational.
It is.
So
it's a pipeline.
It's a pipeline. You got to be careful. Pipeline.
Well, here, let me explain. Okay. Let me explain. So, when we use the term donor pipeline, on the one end of the pipeline, we have new donors coming in, right? And it's our job, what we exist to do, so that we can make the impact we make, is to move them through the pipeline into that ownership place. We realized, because we looked at our data differently, that we were bringing donors in and they were staying with us, but they stayed in this dollar level where the pipeline just started to swell. They were still with us. Our retention rates are incredibly high. But those people were staying with us at that level. And we realized we need to be building relationship with those people differently so that we move them down the pipeline into that place of ownership. So there are nonprofits, truly. Here's a silly analogy. Imagine somebody has a big box full of marbles, and those marbles represent donors, and they dump them on the table, right? The marbles are going to scatter. Some will stay on the table, some won't. And so what a lot of nonprofits do is they scream, get more marbles, right? And they do it again. Well, what we do is we build a little barrier around the table so that when we get more marbles and throw them on the table, they stay on the table, and that's how we're building our donor base.
Okay, all right. Marbles.
Marbles.
I like that.
He's writing it down. It's good.
That's good. That's a good sign in these forums when people start taking notes. What about when you're working with people? So you're working with a donor, and I just can't get off the fundraising thing. I'm sorry. I know it's the least favorite thing to talk about. What about just the message of giving? I mean, do you see part of your role being an education about people giving? Because the percentages are pretty low on who gives. from their resources to charities in America. How do you encourage it, other than what you've already talked about today? And what do you think we need to see in Phoenix when it comes to generosity?
Yeah, great question. There are countless ways to encourage it and to promote it. This is one. I'm looking right at one of our most newest employees who has been here now. It's in her third week. We created a new position for someone to be in relationship with churches and corporations. So it's going to be Rachel's role to identify corporations, and of course churches are absolutely in this definition, who have corporate social responsibility guidelines. That's a very fancy way of saying what do they support. We're going to look for corporations in the Valley who support homelessness, addiction recovery, food insecurity, meaning people who simply don't have enough food. There are so many corporations in the Valley who support causes like that. We need to make sure that they know about us. And then alongside that, there are many corporations in the Valley who are Christ-based. You know, their owners are believers, and they want to support organizations like ours. So that's one way. We do a really good job of identifying, organizations and people like that. And then as far as with the people who are with us, I think one of the biggest reasons they stay with us is we do a good job of identifying what we do that individual is passionate about. So if I reach out to one donor and I'm telling them all about everything we do from a food bank standpoint, but that person's heart is really for helping the homeless and getting them off the street, they're going to find an organization that does that. So it's a combination of that. It's identifying people who have an affinity for what we do, inviting them to partner with us, and then knowing that affinity and making sure we keep talking about that impact.
Great. Okay. All right, we're done with that. Let's talk about the mission, the Phoenix Rescue Mission, okay? Why does it exist? I would say exist to end homelessness. How would you?
Yes, and.
Okay.
At the highest altitude, Phoenix Rescue Mission exists to the way I term it is to transform lives here on Earth and lives for all eternity, truly. Everything we do is built on a foundation of introducing people to or reintroducing people to Christ. And we do that alongside ministering to the homeless. And I especially, I realize I don't even think about how I'm going to describe it. The word is minister to. We minister to people living on the streets. We minister to families who come to the food bank. We minister to people who come to the Glendale Empowerment Center and want help getting their diploma or want help trying to build a resume. We do all of that. We do all of the tactical, but all the while we're ministering to them as well. And so that truly is what Phoenix Rescue Mission does at its core.
Okay. So just this problem of homelessness, I just want to talk about that for a little bit, because the homelessness problem can increase, it can decrease. Certainly, I think we've at least anecdotally heard it's been increasing. So my question is, do you think it's a problem that can be solved?
It's certainly a problem that can be significantly addressed. There are some people living on the streets that are just going to live on the streets. They're making that decision. There are so many people living on the streets, and Steve talked about them in the video. They don't want to be living on the streets. However, as Steve described, they think there's a stigma, and so not only will they not reach out and get the help they need, they don't know who to go to get the help they need. So that's why we have a street outreach team ministering to people living on the streets to give them information they don't have. My very first time, our vehicles are called Hope Coaches. So 2 people get in a Hope Coach, and you should see us where we go. We're driving down into the dry riverbeds in the West Valley. We're going anywhere the homeless set up camp, and we minister to them. And now some of them know we're coming, and not only do we give them basics, water and some food and some toiletries and the like, but we get to know them and we get to know what they need. And the very first time I was on a Hope Coach, we met a man who had just been kicked out by his father. He had not been in the country long, and he had none of his papers, or he thought he didn't have any of the papers he needed. Well, our street outreach team kept talking to him, realized he had enough for them to go get him the documents he needed. And so we asked him, are you okay with us taking this paperwork with us? Now, you can imagine, we just met the man. And arguably, human nature says he should have said no, but he trusted us because of the way he was ministered to. And 24 hours later, he got his paperwork back. And a very short time later, he got the documentation he needed and came into our program.
Great, yeah, great stories, and I'm sure you have just endless examples of where you've made that kind of difference. As you were talking about handing stuff out and going through the washes, I was remembering our last forum where we had Sheriff Paul Penzone on, and yeah, he was, I don't know if you got to be there for that, but I really enjoyed talking with him. And he, obviously we talk with him about law enforcement,
right.
So I'm interested in how you interact with law enforcement, because there's an element of that I think that people have questions about when it comes to homelessness.
Our street outreach team interacts with law enforcement a lot. They go out with police officers into those areas, and it really helps build the trust between people who encamp in those areas and the police departments. So we've got countless stories of how our street outreach team goes out with police officers, and when they see the officers with our street outreach people, and oftentimes the officers won't go in uniform. They'll have their badge showing, but they'll just be in street clothes, and it makes it very real for the people living in the encampments. So we have a great relationship with, and we work often with local law enforcement.
Yeah, great. What do you think this group, these are business people who've worked in not-for-profits, the general Phoenix public, what do you think we misunderstand about homelessness?
There are a couple of answers to that question. One is that people are homeless because they're too lazy to get a job. They see people standing on the street corner and they ask themselves, why don't they just go get a job? Jobs are abundant these days. Why are they living on the streets? There's so much more to that. As Yvette spoke to, there is a definite mental illness component with some people. There's also the component of many people are dangerously close to losing their home, especially if this rent moratorium, when the rent moratorium has been lifted. Some people are still able to take advantage of that, but if that's ever fully lifted, there are people just getting by the skin of their teeth, and they're on the verge of being homeless as well. And so now we're talking about moms with 3 kids living in a car. There are so many people in the valley who live that way. And those kids get up in the morning, they go to school, and their friends at school have no idea that's the world they live in. So there are so many reasons why people find themselves homeless. Sometimes people are in an abusive relationship and they simply need to get out, and they get out and they have a bag and they have their car and they have no family and friends in the valley, and they just find themselves living on the streets. So sadly, there are a lot of reasons for it. But when I think about what we do at Phoenix Rescue Mission, what many of those folks need to get out of that situation is available to them. We help them get what they need to get out of it.
What should I do when I see somebody standing on the corner asking me for?
You should love on them. You should look them in the eye. You should talk to them like they're a real person, like a person you might be standing in line with at the grocery store. They're people. You interact with them. Our best recommendation is not to give them cash, but rather give them, and we do it. I do it. I have, sounds so silly. At Halloween time, McDonald's sold these coupons, right? Free hamburger, free fry, free Coke, free ice cream cone. And I bought as many of them as they had after Halloween, because that's what I give out to people on the street corner. We also have things called rescue cards, and you can get them from our website. And if you're writing it down, it's phxmission.org. But we have what we call rescue cards, and you can print those out, and it has phone numbers. The great majority of people living on the streets have a cell phone. And so there are phone numbers where those folks can call and get someone to answer the phone and give them answers to some of the questions they need. So those are the kinds of things we encourage you to give out when you see people on the corners.
Did you say most of them have cell phones?
The great majority of them have cell phones. Around the world, there are people who don't have toilets, but they have cell phones. It's a thing. That's the number
People are
one
nodding.
thing
You
people
knew
won't
this?
get rid
You
of.
guys knew this?
Yeah.
Really? How do they pay the monthly fee?
Any combination of, they get some money from the state, they get money on the street corner.
Wow.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Most of them have a cell phone. I suppose it's a useful tool, for some of those resources.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. News to me. Thank you. I'm learning. Are there other issues that we have misconceptions about besides just homelessness? That you run into?
Most definitely. And two of them are two other big things that we do as a mission. One is addiction recovery, and the other is food insecurity. Again, people have misconceptions about both, and especially when it comes to addiction recovery. We are not the kind of mission, and there are many of them around the country, and there are organizations like this in the Valley, and thank goodness they exist. But people don't come to Phoenix Rescue Mission to get a meal and a service and a bed for the night, and then they go out in the morning and it's good luck. Maybe we'll see it tonight, maybe not if we're full. We are a residential recovery center. And I would say the majority of people in both our men's center and our women and children's center are there for addiction recovery. But there are people who are also there for different reasons. Many of them, again, like I spoke of, were in abusive relationships and they had nowhere to go, or they've been traumatized in some way in their life. So there's a misconception around, why people are in the situation they're in. Truly thank God we exist, because oftentimes, as Steve pointed out, right, 4-time felon, oftentimes we are the last resort, and it's either the last resort because you're going to go to prison for the rest of your life, or more tragically, you're the last resort because that person is not going to live much longer because of their deep addiction. And so either the courts or their families, or even sometimes ministering to them on the streets, we bring them to our residential recovery centers. When we bring them in, we assess them. If our program is right for them, they come into our program, and if not, we help them get into another program. But our program is at least a year long, and not only do we bring people out of active addiction, but we also give them life skills. We help them be far more functional than they were when they arrived. We put them on one of two tracks. They either go on a ministry track, and right now, we employ about 120 people, and I'd say about 20% of them have come through our program. So they graduate our program, and we've gotten to know them so well, and they've gotten to know us so well, and we know how high quality they are because they serve while they're living on campus, that they apply for, and we hire them for jobs. And we've now turned the corner where a number of them have been promoted to supervisor roles. And like the video said, it really means something when you can look someone in the eye and say, I've been where you've been. I was you. So addiction recovery, certainly a big misconception. And again, food insecurity, and especially when COVID hit. Now people are, sure, jobs are abundant, but depending on their situation, even that job or even those 2 jobs doesn't put enough food on their table. So that's another misconception about why people need food banks. The reasons are as unique and as individual as the people themselves.
Great. I want to circle back. We've got about 5 minutes or so before we're going to take your questions. So if you haven't been using your phone to text your questions in, go ahead and do that. I want to circle back to kind of the not-for-profit space in general and ask a question I was discussing with my parents the other day, who are here. Hi, Mom and Dad. Get a chance to do that. My dad spent his career in not-for-profit work, so I grew up stamping envelopes and going to fundraising events myself. And one of the things we were talking about was, well, why isn't there just one nonprofit that sends me a letter every year that I can just donate to and they can take care of things, right? Or is this specialization that I get 100 letters every year, is that a good thing? Do you work with other not-for-profits? Are you guys collaborating? Because homelessness is one issue, right? But there's lots of other ones as well.
We collaborate with a lot of Valley nonprofits, and we collaborate with other missions around the country, sharing information, sharing, tools and practices and the like. But we collaborate with a lot of nonprofits who have similar, they make similar impact as Phoenix Rescue Mission. So truly, we are all about collaboration, and that's just not a catchphrase. We really do. We have amazing partnerships with people like Cass and Hope Women's. In fact, Hope Women's Center is coming out and spending the day with us tomorrow because they want to dive deeper into what we do and how we do it. So there's a lot of that going on. To answer your question, why, this is just opinion, why don't we have one big nonprofit and everyone feeds into it? Two big things. Bureaucracy, how much of what goes where, and then secondly, at some point, it would be impossible to share the impact made because that donor made that donation to that big, massive nonprofit, and then eventually that donor very likely wouldn't give anymore because they just don't know where their money's going and what kind of impact it's making. So I do think that there are some nonprofits where there could be more partnership, especially those ones that deal with hope and research. But when it comes to what we do, I'm not just saying this because it's us, but we are great at what we do, and we tell a great story.
And so if I'm wanting to make a difference as a business, as a donor, then how do you approach that as an individual?
Yeah, we invite after we share what we do, and ideally let you experience what we do. So oftentimes...
But when I'm looking across the landscape of Phoenix, and I'm wanting to make an impact, and I have 100 hours and $100, do I do 100 different nonprofits? Or do I do 10 each at $10? Or do I do 5? My math breaks down eventually, but...
I hope this doesn't come off as a non-answer, but the answer is, it's up to you. Because you may decide to do, you may decide to do that 10 thing. Chris may decide to say, I'm going to support 2 nonprofits because I want to make a significant impact with those 2 nonprofits. So really, like I said before, the answer truly is as unique as the donor.
Okay, all right. I'll let you off the hook on that one. That's a decent answer.
Write that down too.
Okay, so what's the future of Phoenix? And then we'll get to questions. When you look at the future of, and you can talk about specifically homelessness or, just as a community member here, and you've got lots of exposure to the problems that we face and the opportunities that we have. What's your vision as the CEO of the Rescue Mission and just as Ken, who cares about the area he lives in?
Yeah. I was asked that question really early in the calendar year, and my answer was expansion. And I mean that in every definition of the term, expanding, and I'm talking specifically here about the mission, but I do think this applies to the Valley. Expanding the quality of what we do, the quantity of what we do, touching more people than we do today, expanding geographically. There are places in the Valley that we're not serving yet, but will. Expanding what we do from an addiction recovery standpoint. I can't let today go without saying that we just built a brand new men's recovery center. Our men's recovery center was in a retrofitted truck wash near 35th Avenue and Buckeye, and we made the best of it. We truly did. And we were able to accommodate 160 men in that building. We built a new building. We moved our men in June. We had 160 people in the old building. This new building can accommodate 280 men, and we are in the process of closing out the renovation of the existing building. When that's done, we'll be able to accommodate 80 more. So we went from 160 men, and we were at capacity when I joined right before COVID. And now we're going to 360 men. And so really, it's all about making more impact with more people in more places. That's what we're going to do as a nonprofit, and that's what we're going to encourage our partners to do as well.
Very good. Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Also vision that, there's potentially an NBA and NFL championship in the works. That's part of the vision?
Not inconceivable,
Phoenix, huh?
right?
Right?
Exactly.
How are we doing on that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's totally unrelated to what we're talking about, but it just sprung into my head when you talked about expansion. All right, we got questions coming your way, Ken, now from the audience. This is the lightning round version of the Phoenix Business Forum. Oh, what's your budget?
Very round numbers. This year, about high 13, 14 million in cash, and then we have something called gift in kind. That's you have value to the things that are given to you so that you can execute your mission. We have a great relationship with St. Mary's Food Bank and with all of our other donors, so we have an additional about 8 million in especially food that's given to us.
Wow, 8 million in gifts in kind.
Yeah.
Is there other kind of gifts in kind that you're looking for from the community besides food? And
yeah, actually, there is, and it depends on the time of year. For instance, when we were opening the new men's building, we set up an Amazon wish list page for sheets and bedding and toiletries and things like that. Right now, if you go to our Amazon wish list page, it's all about toys for the Winter Wonderland event that's coming up later on in the month. So those are the kinds of things, but it's mostly food and toiletries.
Okay. All right, great. How much do we need to donate to get a coffee mug like, I think this coffee
Like this?
mug? I don't think it's a rescue mission coffee mug. I think it's this lovely Phoenix Business Forum.
It's pretty
coffee
cool,
mug,
but
which we may begin, selling here. I mean,
it would be so
got a couple
easy
comments.
to put rescue mission where it says business forum. So
That's true. You could
I'll
do
tell
that. You
you,
could put it just right over the top.
I'll watch this one if anybody.
You can get yourself a deal on Ken's washed mug, which you get to keep, by the way.
Oh,
so yeah,
thank
enjoy
you.
that.
That's awesome. Thank
yeah.
you.
All right, next question. Geez, these guys who are vetting the questions. What advice would you give leaders of new nonprofits? That's a good question.
Yeah. Surround yourself with really passionate and talented people. And I mean from a board level, from a volunteer level, from a staff level, and tell your story. Tell the story about impact. Those nonprofits that are always going out, hand out, you're not telling your story correctly. You've got to talk about the impact you're making. Or if you're a new nonprofit, the impact that you intend to make, because that's why you put the nonprofit together in the first place. But really, it's surround yourself with great people, both from a passion for the mission and from a what they bring to the table standpoint.
Okay, great. I was actually going to touch on government too. So this question is, how have the politicians in Phoenix helped or hurt your mission?
We get a tremendous amount of bipartisan support. So it doesn't matter who's in what city council chair. Truly, we have great partnerships with both sides of the aisle in Phoenix. So that hasn't affected us negatively at all. We have strong support from all of them.
Despite your faith-based mission, which sometimes comes up as maybe a barrier, right, for some politicians to support or the government to get involved with, but despite that, you still see a lot of support.
We do. We see a tremendous amount of support. And if any individual politician doesn't support us from a faith-based standpoint, I'm really not trying to be funny when I say this, we don't know about it.
Yeah.
But we do know about the great majority of them who do, and many of them especially do because we're faith-based.
Okay. The pandemic. How have you handled COVID-19? That's a big question.
Yeah. Which day?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, really early on, when all of us were trying to figure out what COVID was, and what do you do about it, the only thing that changed at the mission for a really short amount of time is we stopped bringing people into the recovery centers because we didn't want to bring people in, who had been out. And when I say on the streets, I don't mean homeless. I just mean you weren't on our campus. We weren't bringing those people onto our residential campus, but we figured out a way how to keep them separate while we can get them tested. And now we get their test results in 24 hours. And then when they test negative, we can get them into our program. If they test positive, we have a great partnership with Circle the City, and they put them up until they test negative and then return them to us. So that's one way. Another way, and even to this day, if I'm going to the office and if we're in meetings, we're in masks because we have to, walk the talk. And so the CDC says today that, and we are considered a high transmission county. And so because we have residential recovery centers, we require that if you're in a large group, you wear a mask. So really, I mean, other than a couple of waves that hit in the last, now what, 20 months, I think we've done a superb job handling COVID. And let me brag for just a moment. We were awarded the best response to COVID among nonprofits by the Arizona Capital Times. So, yeah, we've done a good job.
And then on the business side, the resources have continued to come in through the pandemic?
To say that God has provided for this mission would be such an understatement. Last year, especially right around when COVID hit, what happened, there was a phenomenon among nonprofits where if you were more of those research-based nonprofits, you saw significant losses. And I used to work for those kind of organizations. I have great friends in those organizations. Massive layoffs and the like. If you worked in an organization where you were making an impact today, you saw significant increases. I think you couple that with the fact that we are faith-based and so many believers in the Valley know about us and support us. We were abundantly blessed last fiscal year. This fiscal year, we knew that we couldn't budget for what we got the previous year, but we budgeted in what I referred to as aggressively conservative. And as we sit here today and our fiscal year started July 1, we are far exceeding those expectations. So yes, COVID had something to do with it, but it's truly it's the grace of God, one, and then secondly, just how much our supporters know us, love us, and want to make sure that we're able to fund what we need to do.
Great. Good to hear that. Okay. We've got a hand raise. I'm sorry, sir. It's 2021. You can only text. No, I'm just kidding. Do you have a question?
Yeah, Ken and I were talking earlier. Could you just enlighten the group a little more about some of the skills you teach them? That when I was working with you, I found so interesting, such as teaching them how to conduct a job interview.
Yes.
And get the job. How to use a computer. I remember you had a computer lab down on 35th Avenue where you taught them how to use a computer. A lot of these people have so many jobs today at least require minimal computer skills.
Yes.
A lot of them don't have.
Yeah, thank you. So in our residential recovery centers and now in other places around the Valley, because we partner with other nonprofits, we provide so many services for people to not only get a job, but also then move up in the job they have. So we have a tremendous vocational development program. We do anything from teach people basic computer skills. They can get certified in Microsoft Office. We teach people how to build a resume. We actually have interview coaching so that when people are about to go on an interview, they role play and coach, and it helps them become more comfortable. We have a tremendous customer service program, so everyone who goes through our recovery program and some people out in the community, they get our customer service program, which I think is one of the best I've ever experienced. So they have fantastic customer service skills. And we used to operate a cafe on 15th Avenue in Van Buren, and the cafe is no longer operational. But the things that we used to teach the small number of people working in the cafe are not now taught to a much larger number of people who are working the kitchens at the residential recovery center. So we really even haven't lost a beat from that standpoint by closing the cafe. But again, we exist, and this is an example, to help people become more functional and in some cases from a job standpoint, far more marketable, so that they not only can get a great job, but maybe even if they have a job that they feel like they're going to be in for a while if they don't improve their skills, we give them the ability to do that.
Great question. Thank you. How do you think the government's stimulus will affect the economy and in turn addiction, food insecurity, and homelessness in the next 10 years?
COVID has taught me that if you try to answer a question 10 years out, you are assured that you're not going to get it right. The world is changing at, I think, a pace that we have just never seen before. How the government stimulus will affect the economy and then in turn addiction and food insecurity. If those rent moratoriums are completely lifted, there will be some people who simply will find themselves living on the streets, maybe turning to addiction, likely finding themselves food insecure. On the flip side, I think we're getting to the point where it's not in your best interest financially to not work anymore. So I think this phenomenon that we're seeing of, so many companies not being able to fill open positions, me personally, I don't think that's going to last much longer. I think people are going to find themselves not getting that direct deposit from the government like they used to, and they're going to have to go out and get a job. So it's a back and forth. It's an ebb and flow, and then hopefully something completely unexpected like COVID doesn't hit us like it did. And that's a very long way of saying there is no good answer to that question.
In the short term, though, have you seen people getting more jobs out of your program? Have you seen more?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, people who come out of our program, they're looking for work. They want to be great functional members of society. Mm-hmm. And so the people coming out of our program, I've got a big smile on my face because I'm thinking about real life examples. They're graduating from our program, driving, we're not new to them, but a very new car, like rivals, half of our cars. And there's one of my favorite stories. This gentleman graduated from our program with $70,000 in the bank. And let me take it back. He didn't graduate from program. We have a great aftercare program, meaning people can live on campus after they graduate the one-year program because they still have work to do, and being in that kind of community really helps them. But he got such a great, well-paying job that when he finally left campus, he had $70,000 in the bank.
Wow. Yeah, round of applause. Might have to come stay there for a little bit there myself. $70,000, not a bad idea. No, that's a great story.
Yeah.
There are a lot of impactful stories. I've been around the mission, and those stories just continue and continue. So if you're not familiar with the mission, get familiar with them, and I'm sure Ken would love to have you get involved and go through the pipeline as a donor as well, and an investor in what the mission's doing. Let's give Ken a round of applause for being here with us.
Thank you.